The courtroom was quiet, but not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that trembled at the edges, waiting to break. Natasha Brown sat at the defense table, her hands gripping the edge as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Her breaths were shallow, her skin pale against the deep red of her blouse. A dark smear of blood marked her temple, just enough to draw stares, just enough to be unsettling. Overhead, the fluorescent lights hummed a little too loud, their glow too sharp. Across from her, Ben Brown loomed. Tall, composed, a perfect storm of charisma and cruelty in a tailored black suit. He was mid-performance, projecting righteous concern even as his words flayed her, subtle jabs disguised as sadness, slander masked as pity. Beside him, in a cobalt dress that caught the light like a blade, sat Harriett Sloane, smiling. Not the smile of a witness or a supporter, but of a woman watching the final blow land exactly where she'd planned. She leaned in, whispered something to Ben, then actually pointed, at Natasha. The jury shifted uncomfortably. Lawyer James, one of Ben's two legal hounds, stalked the floor with predatory ease. "Mrs. Brown," he said sharply, "can you answer the question, please?" Natasha blinked. Her thoughts scattered like leaves in wind. What was the question again? I'm trying," she murmured. Her voice cracked. Her throat was dry, her head pounding. "You're trying?" James pounced. "You've had ample time to prepare, and yet you can't seem to remember anything. That's been a pattern, hasn't it?" Ben folded his hands and sighed deeply, the picture of a long-suffering spouse. "This is exactly what I've been dealing with," he said softly. "She's not well." That's when it started. The high-pitched whine in Natasha's ears. The lights above seemed to pulse. The room tipped slightly to the left. Harriett tilted her head with a soft chuckle, as if amused by the sight of a woman unraveling. Natasha's fingers slipped from the table. She opened her mouth, trying to speak, to say something, anything, but no words came. Then the world just fell away. She crumpled to the floor in front of everyone. Gasps exploded through the courtroom. A bailiff shouted for a medic. Harriett pressed a hand to her lips in mock shock, but her eyes sparkled. Ben leapt from his seat, calling out, "Natasha! Natasha!" in a voice that was just loud enough to sound like panic, but quiet enough to preserve his dignity. "She's clearly unfit to proceed," he barked at the judge. "This confirms everything." And for a moment, just a moment, it looked like he had won. What would you do if the whole courtroom thought you were crazy? Think the collapse was staged? Or is someone else pulling the strings? Subscribe now to keep following Natasha's unraveling and recovery. Comment below, where are you watching from? Who do you think mailed the judge the recording? But Harriett's smirk had come too early. She didn't know about Judge Fogg, and she had no idea about the recording already sitting on his desk. The collapse wasn't the beginning of Natasha's unraveling. It was the tipping point of a slow, meticulous sabotage, 6 months of confusion, isolation, and a body that felt less and less like her own. What no one in that courtroom could see, yet, was that she hadn't lost control of her mind. Someone had been stealing it. The first time it happened, Natasha was standing at the kitchen sink. She blinked, and the glass she was washing slipped from her hands. It shattered in the basin, shards sparkling beneath the stream of water. Her heart raced, but not from the noise. It was the time. She looked up at the clock and frowned. Hadn't it just been morning? Ben walked in behind her with 2 coffees and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You okay?" he asked casually, as if he hadn't already been watching her. I think I lost track of time," she said, staring at the sink like it held the answer. He leaned in, too close. "You've been doing that a lot lately." The dizziness came next, a slow spin that started when she stood up too fast, then eventually crept in while she was still. her words sometimes slurred. Names, simple details, appointments, gone. Ben started tracking it all. Quietly, methodically. He took notes on his phone. Just so I can help, he said. But soon, he was sharing those notes. First with friends, she's just under a lot of stress. Then with employees, we might need to adjust things. Natasha's not quite herself these days. And finally, with their lawyer, she's been forgetting things. Slurring. Her doctor hasn't found anything yet, but I'm worried, Ben told him, faux concern painting his voice with just enough sincerity to sound noble. Harriett Sloane entered the picture like an actress in a perfectly timed scene. Natasha returned home one afternoon from the pharmacy, trying to refill supplements Ben insisted she take, and found Harriett in the living room, curled up on their couch, barefoot and laughing at something on Ben's phone. "Oh," Harriett said, as if Natasha were interrupting a photo shoot. "Ben didn't tell me you'd be back so soon." Natasha's smile faltered. "I live here." Harriett laughed lightly, not moving. "Of course you do." From that point forward, Harriett was everywhere. She dropped off homemade soup. She swung by the office. She volunteered to help with Natasha's calendar. At first, Natasha thought she was being paranoid, but the scent of Harriett's perfume started lingering longer than any visit warranted. Her mug appeared in the dishwasher. One of her earrings turned up on the guest bathroom counter, and Ben's behavior shifted in parallel. When Natasha questioned things, he told her she was overreacting, misremembering, making scenes. "You're not well, Tasha," he said gently, brushing her cheek. "Let's not turn this into something it isn't." The gaslighting escalated in small, suffocating doses. "Don't you remember agreeing to cancel dinner? You said we'd move that meeting. I already told you about this." But she hadn't. He hadn't. Or had he? That was the worst part. Her certainty slipping like soap from her fingers. Ben began suggesting she stay home from board meetings. "You've been under pressure lately. Let me handle it for a while." Staff at their joint company began looking at her sideways, whispering. One intern flinched when Natasha asked for a simple report. Another asked quietly if she was okay to drive. Then came the proof. A photo. Natasha slumped over the kitchen table, vodka bottle in the frame. She stared at it in disbelief. Her hair was matted, eyes unfocused, head down. But she never drank vodka. Hated the stuff. Ben showed it to their attorney. "She's not drinking because she's depressed," he said. "She's depressed because she's drinking." Then came the receipts. Dozens of charges to liquor stores, all in her name. Her credit card. Her ID. Desperate, she confided in someone outside the web. Frank Perks, a private investigator with a reputation for quiet discretion. He met her in a car 2 towns over. "What you're describing sounds deliberate," he said, scanning her face. "Not just sabotage, chemical manipulation. Could be supplement tampering. Could be more." She gave him everything she could remember. He nodded, took notes, asked questions. 3 days later, he stopped answering his phone. A week after that, his license was suspended for gross ethical violations. Ben smirked when she brought Frank's name up. "You really should be careful who you trust, Tasha. Not everyone's who they say they are." Then the lost time began. Hours. Days. Natasha would blink and find herself in different clothes, in a different room. One night, she woke up in the bathtub, fully dressed, cold water running. Another morning, she found an email in her drafts folder she didn't remember writing. An apology to Ben for being so unstable. She hadn't written it. She couldn't have. But her fingers trembled over the keyboard. Ben entered the room moments later. "You look pale," he said. "You've been getting worse." Then came the suggestion, a wellness retreat. Just for a few weeks. Just to reset. Ben brought her a brochure for a secluded healing center upstate. The language was gentle, but the facility looked sterile, locked down, too far from anyone she knew. "I'm not going," she said flatly. Ben's voice dropped to a warning tone. "You really should think about what's best for everyone." That night, she barely slept. Her hands shook so badly, she couldn't hold a glass without spilling it. The walls of her life had narrowed into a single corridor with no doors. One morning, days before the court hearing, she stood at the kitchen counter staring at her mug of tea. Steam rose in slow, soft curls. The scent was wrong. It was her usual blend, but something beneath it lingered. A sharp, metallic note. She lifted it carefully. Sipped. A bitter taste crept across her tongue. Not herbal. Not familiar. Ben had left early that morning. But Harriett was there. Behind her. Watching. The courtroom had never seen anyone faint like that. One moment Natasha Brown was standing, or at least trying to, and the next, her body dropped like a puppet whose strings had been cut. A sickening thud echoed as her head hit the floor. Bailiffs rushed forward. Someone screamed, and for a fraction of a second, the mask on Ben Brown's face slipped. His expression wasn't concern. It was calculation. But it snapped back on quickly as he shoved through the gallery toward her. "Tasha, let me through. That's my wife," he shouted, hands raised like a man in anguish. He was blocked immediately. "Sir, step back," one of the EMTs barked. Ben turned toward Judge Fogg. "Your Honor, please, she needs me." Judge Fogg's voice was steel. "Mr. Brown, sit down." "But, sit down. You are not to follow her." Ben stared at the judge, nostrils flaring. He looked like he might lunge. But something in Judge Fogg's expression made him freeze. Slowly, Ben backed away. Paramedics lifted Natasha's limp body onto a stretcher. Her hand flopped over the edge. A faint bruise bloomed near her wrist. Harriett Sloane didn't move from her seat. She adjusted her lipstick, crossed her legs, and said nothing. In his private chambers, Judge Fogg closed the door with a snap. The room was dark-paneled, suffocatingly quiet. He didn't sit. He walked straight to his desk drawer and pulled out the envelope that had haunted him for weeks. A plain manila folder. No return address. Delivered by hand. Inside, one black USB drive. He hadn't told a soul. Until now. He picked up the phone and buzzed in both legal teams. "Bring counsel for both parties to my chambers. Now." No press. No jury. Minutes later, Ben, Harriett, and their lawyers James and Fred stepped inside. Harriett's gaze flicked to the desk. She hesitated. "What's going on?" Ben asked. Judge Fogg held up the USB. 2 weeks ago, I received an unmarked envelope. Inside was this. Ben went pale. Harriett's hand twitched against her skirt. Contained within are multiple audio files. The main one includes a very clear conversation. "Mr. Brown, Miss Sloane, I don't know who recorded it. I don't know how they did. But what I do know is that the voice print matches both of you." Harriett's voice came out small, sharp. "That's illegal." "Correct. Which is why I couldn't admit it into record," the judge replied. "Not unless something happened to independently corroborate its contents." He stepped closer. And then, Mrs. Brown collapsed. In front of me. In front of the court. Just as the recording described. Ben cleared his throat. "This is ridiculous." "Is it?" Fogg said. "Because the file describes adjustments to dosages, to herbal blends, to inducing fainting spells under courtroom stress." "And Miss Sloane? You're on record laughing while you describe how fogged she looks in the morning." Harriett opened her mouth, but Judge Fogg cut her off. "I've ordered an emergency toxicology panel. I'm notifying the medical examiner. If what's in her system matches what's said in this file." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Ben broke first. "This is a setup. Somebody's targeting us." "No," Judge Fogg said quietly. "Somebody tried to erase a woman's mind." Weeks earlier, P.I. Frank Perks sat hunched over his laptop, his office dark except for the blue glow of the screen. He'd found something, buried inside a digital calendar cache from Harriet Sloane's old tablet. Timestamps, patterns, a recurring note, delivery to TB. He triangulated locations. Surveillance footage from a neighbor's doorbell cam caught Harriet dropping something through Natasha's mail slot. A pale paper bag labeled with a Natural Pharmacy's logo. Frank knew what he had. But the moment he backed up the files, everything went sideways. His office was broken into. The hard drive vanished. His license was pulled days later on an anonymous tip. Clients dried up overnight. He disappeared. What they didn't know? He'd already mailed one backup copy, unmarked, anonymous, to the only person he trusted to make it count. Judge Fogg. Back in the hospital, Natasha stirred beneath sterile sheets. The light was cold and clinical, and force fed into her arm. Her mouth was dry. Her eyes opened slowly, and for the first time in weeks, they stayed open. She turned her head. Something inside her was different. Calmer. Clearer. Not whole, but less fogged. A nurse noticed. "Mrs. Brown? You're awake." Natasha blinked. "Where?" "You fainted in court. You're in a safe place. We've run some tests." "Tests?" she echoed, her voice hoarse. "Routine talk screen. Part of your collapse protocol," the nurse replied. "Your attending physician requested a full panel." "Very smart move." Natasha let the words settle. For a moment, she couldn't speak. But memories began pressing in. A bitter taste in her morning tea. Harriet's perfume lingering after she left the kitchen. Ben's eyes, cold, calculated, as he handed her smoothies she didn't ask for. The moments she forgot entire hours, entire days. It hadn't been her. It never was. She wasn't broken. She'd been poisoned. Judge Fogg stood alone in his chamber, staring at the phone in his hand. It rang once, twice. Then a voice came through. "This is Dr. Levins. You asked for immediate results on Natasha Brown." "Yes." The voice hesitated. "We found significant traces of neuroactive compounds. Ashwagandha and Gotu kola, yes, but also unlisted nootropics, metabolic suppressants, and a blend of heavy metal binders typically used in cognitive dampening. All mixed in such a way that blood serum wouldn't catch them easily. But hair did." Judge Fogg's jaw tightened. "You're certain?" "Beyond doubt." The judge looked across his desk to the black USB. "Thank you, doctor," he said. "You've done your part." He hung up. Then he stood, straightened his robes, and called the bailiff. The courtroom was reset. Cameras were in position. Press had returned. The gallery buzzed with tension. Ben Brown sat at the plaintiff's table, jaw clenched, hands folded too perfectly. Harriet Sloane avoided eye contact. She kept dabbing her lip with gloss, smearing it, reapplying, as if each pass would keep her mask intact. The doors at the back opened. Judge Fogg entered, face unreadable. He took his seat. He tapped the gavel once. "This court is now back in session," he said. His voice carried with unnatural calm. "We will be reviewing new evidence relevant to this case." James, one of Ben's lawyers, leapt up. "Your Honor, if I may object." "You may not," Fogg interrupted. "Objection noted. Overruled. Sit down." He reached into the folder and drew out the USB. The room froze. "Bring the courtroom to order," Judge Fogg said quietly. "It's time to hear the truth." Judge Fogg held the USB drive like a detonator. "This evidence is now being submitted into the court record," he said calmly, addressing the gallery. Ben's attorney, James, stood instantly. "Your Honor, we strenuously object. That evidence is not admissible." Fred joined him. "This is hearsay at best. Illegally obtained, if it even exists at all." Fogg's gavel struck once. The crack echoed like a gunshot. "Objection overruled. I have ruled this material as admissible due to corroboration with active medical results and emergency context. You've had your chance to object. Now sit down. Ben's jaw tightened. Harriett sat motionless, one manicured hand on the table. Her leg bounced beneath her chair, the only thing betraying her nerves. Judge Fogg gestured to the bailiff. Play the main recording. The one marked Sunday. Kitchen. Volume up. A low hum filled the room. Then, static. Then voices. Ben's voice. Clear. Confident. Cold. Increase the dose. She still remembers too much. Harriet's voice answered, lighter, amused. Just mix it in her tea. She'll forget by lunchtime. She always does. Laughter followed. Not just any laughter. Ben's. Harriet's. The sound of two people savoring their cruelty. Then came details. She's starting to suspect. We can't let her talk to Frank again. Already handled it. I got someone to call in an ethics complaint. His license is toast by next week. God, you're good. She's pathetic, Ben. She thinks smoothies will fix her brain fog. Wait until she sees the wellness center you booked. It's practically a padded cell. Harriett laughed again, this time longer. Then silence. And then Ben again. Once she's committed, the business is mine. Everything is mine. She won't even know it happened. The courtroom didn't breathe. Reporters lowered their pens mid-sentence. A court sketch artist dropped her charcoal. A clerk behind the bench put a hand to her mouth. James looked shell-shocked. Fred had turned away from Ben entirely. Harriett was pale. Frozen. A single tear slid down her cheek. But she didn't wipe it away. Ben's face had gone slick with sweat. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. His hands, flat on the desk, now trembled slightly. Judge Fogg gave it a full beat. Then another. Then. This recording was time-stamped 3 weeks before Mrs. Brown first appeared disoriented in my courtroom. And it directly aligns with the medical toxicology panel we received just now. He looked to the rear chamber doors. Right on cue, a side clerk burst in, a thick manila folder in hand. Judge, this just came in from the hospital. Fogg opened it. Read silently. Then he lifted his eyes. These test results confirm the presence of multiple cognitive impairing agents, several of which match the exact compounds mentioned in the recording. Ashwagandha derivatives spiked with synthetic nootropics, microdoses of lithium, heavy metal filtration agents, all embedded in seemingly benign supplements. The delivery method? Her morning tea. Harriett made a sound, a whimper, like glass cracking under pressure. Ben closed his eyes. Just for a second. When he opened them, they looked wild. Judge Fogg stood. This case is no longer solely a matter of divorce or competency. It has now crossed into the realm of criminal law. He raised his voice, not loud, but with razor-edged clarity. Bailiff. 2 guards moved instantly. Arrest Ben Brown and Harriett Sloan. Immediately, the courtroom erupted. Harriett shrieked. Not a scream, but a high-pitched, animal sound of disbelief. She stood, backed against the wall as 2 officers grabbed her arms. No, no, you can't. Ben didn't move. He just sat, blinking slowly, as if none of this was real. The moment the cuffs clicked around his wrists, he flinched. A noise escaped his throat, not words. Just breath. Shallow. Empty. As the officers dragged them both forward, Harriett twisted violently. She said yes to the smoothies. She drank them. You can't pin this all on me. Ben turned his head sharply. You made the damn blends. Oh, don't you dare put this all on me. Judge Fogg banged his gavel again, louder this time. Enough. Reporters snapped photos in rapid flashes. The gallery surged. Voices flew. The trial hadn't just turned, it had ignited. And then the side doors opened again. Everyone stopped moving. Everyone turned. Natasha Brown was being wheeled back into the courtroom, pale but conscious, upright in the hospital gurney, an oxygen line resting beneath her nose. Her hair was pulled back. Her hands were folded calmly in her lap. She looked directly at her husband, then at Harriett. Neither could meet her gaze. The courtroom wasn't quiet this time. The gallery rustled with whispers. Reporters clutched notepads, fingers ready. A dozen eyes flicked to the doors every other second. Then they opened, and Natasha Brown walked in, on her own feet. No wheelchair, no gurney, no four-pole trailing behind her. She moved slowly, deliberately, her head high, her eyes clear. The bruises had faded. The fog was gone. In its place stood a woman no one expected. Not defeated, not fragile. Awake. Ben saw her first. His posture stiffened, as if her presence alone made him smaller. Harriett leaned forward, whispering furiously to her lawyer, but her voice trembled. Natasha took her seat on the witness stand, adjusted the microphone, and waited. Judge Fogg didn't hesitate. "Mrs. Brown, you may testify." She looked straight at Ben, and when she spoke, her voice cut through the courtroom like sunlight through storm clouds. "I wasn't losing my mind. You were trying to take it from me." Gasps rippled across the room. Harriett slumped slightly, as if struck. Ben wouldn't look at her. Natasha continued, her voice gaining strength with every word. "I couldn't remember things. My body didn't feel like mine. You told everyone I was unstable, but it wasn't me who was breaking. It was you, poisoning the person who trusted you most, while smiling for the cameras." She turned her gaze to Harriett. "You called it a game, but I was never playing." Ben cracked first. "Don't pin this all on me," he snapped, turning toward Harriett. "She's the one who handled the supplements." Harriett recoiled. "You told me to. You said she'd go quietly if we." "You're the one who laughed about it on tape." Ben shouted. "You made the dosages, Ben. I was just following orders. Are you serious?" Years of whispered plotting burst into open warfare. Their words spiraled. Accusations flew. Their lawyers tried in vain to silence them. The courtroom was no longer a hearing, it was a wreckage site, and they were burying each other in the debris. Judge Fogg banged the gavel 3 times. Enough. Later that afternoon, the sentencing came down. The courtroom was still packed, but no one dared whisper now. Judge Fogg's voice was calm, but final. "Benjamin Brown, for conspiracy to commit fraud, medical tampering, and attempted incapacitation of your spouse, you are sentenced to 15 years in federal prison." Ben slumped in his seat. A bailiff moved behind him. "Harriett Sloan, for aiding and abetting this conspiracy, and for chemical tampering, you are sentenced to 12 years. Harriett began to cry. Quiet, restrained sobs. Both were to be stripped of all jointly held assets. All business rights, properties, and liquid funds were transferred, fully and publicly, into Natasha Brown's name. When the court adjourned, a door opened to the side of the courthouse. Natasha stepped into the autumn sunlight. A camera clicked, then another, then a wave of them. Flashbulbs lit the steps. Reporters called her name, some shouting questions, others simply watching as she walked forward, smiling. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She walked through the noise as if it didn't touch her. Not a victim, not even a survivor. Something more. Later, alone on the courthouse steps, she paused and looked up at the sky. The wind caught her hair. Her coat fluttered. She exhaled, then whispered, "You tried to erase me, but I'm the one who gets to live." What did you think of Natasha's story? Did justice fall hard enough? Or do you still have questions? Subscribe now so you never miss the next twist, reveal, or courtroom betrayal. Leave a comment below. What moment hit you hardest? This was only the beginning.